You can take the guest room or move out. My wife told me when her pregnant sister suddenly arrived with her husband. Great if you're out by the weekend. Her sister added cheerfully. I moved out. But days later, her smug smile disappeared. Panic took over. He's lying? Mom, tell me he's lying. So there I was standing in my own living room. You know, the one I'd been paying the mortgage on for the past 8 years when my wife Clara decided to drop a bomb. So casual you'd think she was announcing what we were having for dinner. She had that look on her face, that specific gleam in her eye that I'd learned over the years meant trouble was brewing. The kind of look that said, I've made a decision and your opinion is adorable, but ultimately irrelevant. Her smile was so bright it could have guided ships through fog. And she clasped her hands together like she was about to announce we'd won a free vacation to Hawaii. Instead, what came out of her mouth was, my sister Bianca and her husband Trevor are moving in with us. She said it with exclamation points, actual verbal exclamation points, like this was supposed to be the most exciting news I'd heard since the invention of streaming television. Now, let me paint you a picture of my life up until this moment. My name is Graham Porter. I'm 34 years old and I work in logistics management, which is a fancy way of saying I spend my days making sure other people's stuff gets from point A to point B without anyone losing their minds. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Specifically, the bills for the 3-bedroom house in the suburbs that Clara and I bought when we still believed in things like building our future together in communication. I'm the guy who fixes the leaky faucets at 2 o'clock in the morning, who remembers to take out the trash on Wednesdays, who actually reads the HOA newsletters that everyone else throws directly into the recycling bin. I'm Mr. Reliable, Mr. Practical, Mr. Get Stuff Done. And apparently, according to my wife's latest executive decision, I was now Mr. Displaced Person. They're moving in, I repeated, because surely I'd misheard. Maybe she said they were moving to Berlin or moving a mountain or literally anything other than moving into the house that I paid for with money I earned by sitting in traffic for an hour each way to a job that makes me want to fake my own death at least twice a week. Yes, Clara practically saying, bouncing on her heels like a contestant on a game show who just won the Showcase Showdown. Bianca's pregnant. Can you believe it? Finally. And they need somewhere stable to stay while they get on their feet. It's perfect timing. Perfect timing for whom exactly? Because from where I was standing, the timing seemed about as perfect as a root canal scheduled during your birthday party. But before I could formulate a response that didn't include the words absolutely and not, Bianca herself materialized in my doorway like some sort of glowing pregnancy specter. And I mean glowing. She had that whole Virgin Mary and maternity genes thing going on. All radiant skin and flowing hair and one hand perpetually cradling her baby bump like it was the Hope Diamond. She looked like she'd walked straight out of a prenatal vitamin commercial, the kind where everyone's laughing in soft focus while eating yogurt in a sunlight kitchen. Graham, she squealed, rushing over to hug me with the enthusiasm of someone who definitely wasn't about to commandeer my bedroom. Thank you so much for understanding. This means everything to us. Trevor and I are just so grateful. Understanding. I hadn't understood anything yet. I'd barely processed the initial announcement and now I was supposed to be grateful that I was being thanked for something I hadn't agreed to. This was moving faster than a con artist's 3-card money game. And I was the mark who couldn't figure out which card was the queen. We'll take the master bedroom, of course. Bianca continued, as if this were the most obvious thing in the world, as natural as gravity or taxes or the inevitability of spoilers for shows you haven't watched yet. I need the extra space for the baby stuff. And the attached bathroom will be crucial when I'm further along. You understand? It wasn't a question. It was a statement delivered with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her entire life. And before I could mount any kind of defense, Clara jumped in with reinforcements. You can take the guest room, she said, her tone suggesting this was actually a generous offer. Like she was doing me some kind of favor by allowing me to sleep in the smallest bedroom in the house I paid for. Or, you know, if you're not comfortable with that, you could always move out. I'm sorry. What did my wife of 6 years just suggest I move out of my own house? The house where my name was on the mortgage, where I'd personally installed the kitchen backsplash after watching 17 YouTube tutorials, where I'd spent 3 weekends painting the living room a color called agreeable gray because Clara said it would make the space feel more open. That house, Bianca, bless her tactless heart, decided to pile on. It would be great if you could be out by the weekend. Actually, she said with a smile so chirpy it could have attracted bluebirds and forest creatures to come braid her hair. That way we can start setting up the nursery right away. We've already got the color scheme picked out. Gender-neutral sage green with white accents. Very Scandinavian. Cue the laugh track because surely this was a sitcom, right? Hidden cameras were going to pop out any second, and Ashton Kutcher was going to tell me I'd been punked, and we'd all have a good laugh about that time my wife and her sister tried to evict me from my own home like I was a deadbeat tenant who'd missed 3 months of rent. But no cameras appeared, no laughing audience, just my wife and her golden child sister staring at me expectantly, waiting for me to roll over and play dead like a well-trained dog. I stood there in my living room. Correction, their living room now, apparently wondering at what point my marriage license had transformed into a hotel timeshare contract. When exactly had I signed away my rights to basic human dignity? Was it in the fine print? Did I miss the clause that said, wife reserves the right to replace husband with sister and her unemployed spouse at any time? No notice required. Trevor, Bianca's husband, chose that moment to wander in from the kitchen holding one of my beers like he owned the place, which I guess in his mind he basically did now. He gave me a little nod, the kind of acknowledgement you'd give to someone you just cut off in traffic. Barely apologetic, mostly indifferent. Trevor was the kind of guy who looked great in photos, but had the personality of a participation trophy. He worked in digital marketing, which as far as I could tell meant he posted on Instagram a lot and occasionally got paid for it. His greatest accomplishment to date was having a protein shake recipe go mildly viral. And he'd been coasting on that success for roughly 2 years. "Hey man," he said, like we were old buddies, like he wasn't currently drinking my beer in preparation for stealing my bedroom. "This is going to be great. We'll be like roommates." Very Modern Family dynamic. Modern Family dynamic, right? Because nothing says modern quite like a 34-year-old man being demoted to guest status in his own home because his sister-in-law's uterus had finally gotten with the program. This wasn't a Modern Family dynamic. This was a hostile takeover with a side of emotional manipulation and a garnish of unbelievable audacity. But what could I say? Clara was looking at me with those eyes, the ones that said, "Don't you dare make a scene in front of my pregnant sister." Bianca was practically glowing with victorious smugness. One hand still protectively wrapped around her belly like I might try to repossess it. And Trevor was obliviously sipping my IPA, probably already mentally redecorating my man cave into whatever the hell a meditation corner was. So, I did what any reasonable, emotionally exhausted man would do in my situation. I smiled, nodded, and started planning my exit strategy. Because if there's one thing I'd learned in my 34 years on this planet, it's that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting even. And I was about to get so even. Let me tell you about Bianca Martinez Walsh. Née Martinez, the golden child of the Martinez family dynasty, a woman so perfect that I'm pretty sure her birth certificate came with a halo and a letter of recommendation from God himself. This woman didn't just walk into rooms. She made in trances every single time. It didn't matter if it was a family barbecue, a funeral, or just popping into the 7-Eleven for a Slurpee. Bianca treated every threshold like it was a runway at Milan Fashion Week, and she was the headlining act. Her hair was so shiny that I was legitimately convinced Pantene had her on some kind of secret sponsorship deal, the kind where they pay you in liquid gold and supernatural follicle strength. I'm talking hair that caught the light at angles that defied physics. Hair that moved in slow motion even when she was just turning her head to judge something, which she did frequently. The woman had perfected this entrance routine down to a science. First, there'd be a pause at the doorway, just long enough for everyone to notice her presence, but not so long that it seemed desperate. Then came the hair flip, executed with the precision of an Olympic gymnast sticking a landing. Finally, she'd flash this smile that said, "Yes, I know I'm gorgeous, and yes, you're welcome for gracing you with my presence." It was honestly impressive from a technical standpoint, even if it made me want to throw things, soft things. But still, in the Martinez family hierarchy, Bianca occupied the top spot, the golden throne, the favorite child position that came with benefits like unconditional approval, zero accountability, and the ability to do literally no wrong, even when she was objectively, demonstrably, in every measurable way wrong. Clara's parents, Miguel and Rosa, treated Bianca like she'd personally cured cancer, while also solving world hunger and composing a symphony. Every accomplishment, no matter how minor, was celebrated like she'd just won a Nobel Prize. Got a promotion at work, alert the media, bought a new car, framed the purchase agreement, ordered a salad instead of fries, nominate her for sainthood. Meanwhile, Clara could have discovered a new planet and her parents would have responded with, "That's nice, dear." But did you see that Bianca reorganized her closet by color gradient? And then there was Trevor. Oh, Trevor, where do I even start with this guy? Trevor Walsh looked like he'd been designed by a committee whose only criteria was, well, photograph well at brunch. He had that whole catalog model thing going on. Square jaw, artfully messy hair that definitely took 45 minutes to look that effortlessly disheveled, and a collection of fitted Henley shirts that probably cost more than my car payment. On paper, He was perfect. In reality, he had the charisma and personality of a wet sponge that had been left in the sink for 3 days and was starting to smell a little weird. The man worked in digital marketing, which I'm pretty sure was code for professional Instagram user. His LinkedIn profile was a masterpiece of vague corporate buzzwords. He was a brand strategist, a content creator, a social media influencer, and a digital storytelling specialist. Translation: he took photos of his breakfast and occasionally companies paid him $20 to say their protein powder didn't taste like chalk. His greatest professional achievement, the crown jewel of his career, was a video of him making some kind of green smoothie that went viral for approximately 15 minutes back in 2023. He'd been dining out on that success ever since, bringing it up at every possible opportunity like he was a war veteran recounting his tour of duty. Yeah, when my smoothie video hit 50,000 views, he'd say apropos of nothing, I really understood the power of authentic content. Authentic content. The man blended kale with overpriced protein powder while wearing a tank top that said, "Rise and grind." Real authentic. Very groundbreaking. Someone called the Smithsonian. But here's the thing about Trevor. He looked good in photos. And apparently in Bianca's world, that was enough to balance out the fact that his personality had the depth of a puddle in a parking lot. In every family photo, Trevor was there with his perfectly symmetrical smile and his arms wrapped around Bianca in that practiced casual but composed way that screamed, "I've rehearsed this pose." He knew his angles. He understood lighting. He could find his best side in any situation, which was really his only marketable skill besides the ability to make expensive coffee drinks sound like spiritual experiences. Now, compared to Saint Bianca and her photographically attractive husband, I was decidedly less impressive to the Martinez family. I was Clara's practical husband, which was family code for the boring guy who has an actual job and does boring things like pay mortgages and own 0 designer scarves. I worked in logistics. I wore button-down shirts from Kohl's. My idea of a wild Friday night was trying a new IPA and watching whatever Netflix documentary everyone had been talking about 3 months ago. I didn't have Instagram-worthy abs or hair that defied gravity. I had a retirement account and a reliable Honda Accord in a toolkit that I actually knew how to use. Apparently, these things did not score points in the Martinez family Olympics. And yes, it was an Olympics. An unspoken but very real competition where Bianca and Trevor were the reigning gold medalists and Clara and I were the team that didn't even qualify for the preliminaries. Every family gathering turned into a showcase of their latest achievements, their newest purchases, their most recent adventures in being effortlessly superior. They'd gone to Napa for a wine education experience. We'd gone to Costco for a buy toilet paper in bulk experience. They'd taken a couple's cooking class taught by a celebrity chef. We learned how to make tacos from a YouTube video. They documented everything on social media with professional quality photos and captions about living their best life. We documented nothing because we were too busy actually living and also because nobody needed to see a photo of me assembling IKEA furniture while questioning my life choices. The comparison started immediately after Trevor and Bianca moved in. Clara, who'd apparently been taking notes at the Church of Bianca for years, decided that this was the perfect opportunity to point out all the ways I fell short of Trevor's scintillating example. We'd be sitting at dinner. Well, we'd be sitting in what used to be the dining room before it became Trevor's creative workspace. And Clara would drop these little comments like conversational landmines. "Trevor's really good at social media strategy," she'd say. As if this were a crucial life skill I'd somehow failed to acquire. "He's got real vision for personal branding." "That's great," I'd reply. "I've got real vision for making sure the power doesn't get shut off because someone actually pays the electric bill on time." Or she'd watch Trevor doing his morning yoga routine, which he performed shirtless in the living room while listening to what I can only describe as sounds of whales having an existential crisis. And sigh wistfully. "Trevor's really committed to wellness. He takes such good care of himself." Fantastic. I'd say I take such good care of the lawn, the gutters, the water heater that died last month, and the $300 plumber bill that came with it. But my personal favorite comparison came one evening when Clara looked at me with this expression of profound disappointment and said, "You know, you could really learn a thing or two from Trevor. He's just so present, so engaged with life." I looked up from my laptop where I was literally paying our car insurance, engaging with the thrilling life experience of making sure we didn't get arrested for driving uninsured and said "What exactly? How to scroll Instagram for 6 hours without spraining a thumb." Because honestly, Clara, that's a skill I'm okay with not having. My thumbs are fine. They're fulfilled. They're living their best thumb life, doing actually useful things like, typing in credit card numbers so we can maintain our ability to participate in modern society. She didn't appreciate my sarcasm. She never did. Instead, she got that look, That pinched expression that said I was being difficult on purpose, that I was deliberately missing the point, that I was too unsophisticated to understand the elevated plane of existence that Bianca and Trevor occupied. And maybe she was right. Maybe I was missing something crucial. Maybe there was some fundamental wisdom in Trevor's ability to turn drinking a smoothie into a 45-minute meditation on intentional living while I savagely chugged coffee and tried to make it to work before my boss noticed I was late again. The thing was, I didn't want to be Trevor. I didn't want to spend 2 hours at the gym every morning taking selfies between sets. I didn't want to describe my breakfast as a culinary journey. I didn't want to treat every mundane activity like it was content for an audience of strangers who'd forget about me the second they scrolled past. I wanted to be a regular human being who did regular human things without performing them for likes and validation. But apparently in Clara's eyes that made me the consolation prize, the participation trophy, the guy she settled for before she realized she could have held out for someone with better lighting and more followers. And Saint Bianca. She watched all of this with that knowing smile, that superior little smirk that said she'd always known she was better, that she'd always been the superior sister with the superior life and the superior husband. She'd glide through my house in my living room, wearing designer maternity, wear that cost more than my entire wardrobe, touching things with her perfectly manicured hands, making little comments about how cozy everything was, which was wealthy person code for small and inferior. She'd rearrange my furniture and call it optimizing the flow. She'd replace my practical kitchen items with her overpriced organic versions and act like she was doing me a favor by introducing me to $20 almond butter. This was my life now. Living as a second-class citizen in my own home. Constantly compared to a man whose greatest accomplishment was achieving minor internet fame for 60 seconds. Watching my wife transform into her sister's biggest fan while I got demoted to the help. Yeah, this was going great. Just fantastic. Living the dream. The American dream. Specifically, the version where you work your ass off only to get kicked to the curb by people who think hustling means posting motivational quotes between naps. But sure, I could learn a lot from Trevor, like how to be completely useless while somehow convincing everyone you're invaluable. That was definitely a skill worth cultivating. The actual eviction from my own bedroom didn't come with any formal paperwork, no certified letters, no legal notices taped to my door like you'd see in a normal eviction scenario. No, this was far more casual, far more insulting, and somehow far more humiliating than any official legal proceeding could have been. Instead of documents, I got my wife's smug smile. You know, the one, that particular expression that said, "I've won and you've lost. And we both know there's nothing you can do about it." It was the kind of smile you'd give someone after beating them at Monopoly. Except instead of losing a board game, I was losing my bedroom, my dignity, and apparently my spine since I just stood there taking it. And then there was Bianca. Oh, sweet chirpy Bianca, who delivered the final blow with all the enthusiasm of a kindergarten teacher announcing snack time. By she sang out, drawing out that E sound for so long. I thought she might run out of breath and pass out. Though I wasn't that lucky. Thanks for understanding. She waved at me with her fingers. That little princess wave that beauty pageant contestants do, like she was sending me off on a cruise I'd won instead of banishing me to the smallest, saddest room in my own house. This is going to be so perfect for the baby. Trevor and I really appreciate you being such a good sport about all this. A good sport, right? Because that's exactly what this was. A friendly game where everyone was having fun, and definitely not a hostile takeover of my life by people who contributed exactly nothing to the mortgage, utilities, or general functioning of the household. I was being such a good sport that I should probably get a trophy, maybe one of those participation ribbons they give to kids who come in last place just so they don't cry. Congratulations, Graham. You successfully allowed yourself to be steamrolled by your own family. Here's a ribbon and a guest room that smells like your grandmother's attic. Picture this scene. Me standing in the hallway with my arms full of clothes I just grabbed from my closet in my bedroom, watching Bianca rub her baby bump like it was a magic lamp that granted wishes. Spoiler alert, the wishes it granted were all hers, and they all involved me getting screwed over. She had one hand making these slow, deliberate circles over her stomach. The universal gesture for, I'm pregnant, therefore I'm untouchable, and you can't say anything negative to me, or you're basically a monster who hates babies and probably kicks puppies for fun. It was emotional blackmail wrapped in maternity wear, and she was working it like a pro. Trevor, meanwhile, was about as helpful as a screen door on a submarine. He stood in the doorway of what was formerly my bedroom. I'm sorry. I'm in his bedroom now, apparently. And just shrugged. That was it. One shrug. His entire contribution to this conversation was a physical gesture that said, hey man, what can you do? Survival of the fittest, except not really fittest. More like survival of the most pregnant and the most willing to be a complete doormat to said pregnant person. He didn't even have the decency to look uncomfortable about it. No guilt, no awkwardness, just a dude who'd stumbled into free housing and was smart enough not to question it. No hard feelings, right, bro? Trevor said, and I wanted to punch him just for calling me bro. We weren't brothers. Brothers don't steal each other's bedrooms. Brothers don't move into each other's houses and act like they're doing you a favor. Brothers definitely don't stand there in their expensive athleisure wear that's never seen the inside of an actual gym sipping a green smoothie in the bedroom. They just jacked from you while offering meaningless platitudes about hard feelings. None at all. I lied through my teeth because what else was I going to say? The truth. That I had so many hard feelings I could build a mountain range out of them. That every fiber of my being was screaming that this was wrong. That this was my house, my room, my life. And they were all acting like I was the hired help being reassigned to the servants' quarters. Yeah, that would have gone over real well. Clara would have accused me of being unsupportive during Bianca's delicate time. And Bianca would have probably burst into those convenient pregnant lady tears that made everyone rush to comfort her while treating me like the villain in a Lifetime movie. So I smiled, nodded, and retreated to the guest room with whatever dignity I had left, which at this point could fit in a thimble with room to spare. The guest room. Let me paint you a picture of this palace. It was the smallest bedroom in the house, barely bigger than a walk-in closet, located at the end of the hall next to the bathroom that had the noisy pipes. You know those pipes that sound like a dying whale every time someone flushes the toilet? Yeah, those pipes. The room had one small window that looked directly into our neighbor's brick wall, providing a stunning view of absolutely nothing. The carpet was this weird mauve color that I'm pretty sure was installed sometime during the Reagan administration. And it had that flat crushed texture that comes from years of neglect and the occasional storage of Christmas decorations. The closet was half the size of my Royale closet and already full of random junk. Old suitcases, boxes of Clara's childhood stuff that her mom had dumped on us. A broken vacuum cleaner that we kept meaning to fix or throw away, but had instead achieved permanent residence in storage limbo. There was a double bed that we'd bought from IKEA 5 years ago during a misguided attempt to furnish a proper guest room. And I'm pretty sure the mattress had the structural integrity of a soggy graham cracker. Every time you sat on it, it made this concerning wheezing sound like it was dying a slow death and wanted you to know about it. But the smell, oh God, the smell. It was this unique combination of mothballs, old carpet, broken dreams, and what I can only describe as grandma's attic meets abandoned storage unit. It was the smell of forgotten things, of items that had been put away and never retrieved, of air that hadn't properly circulated since the Bush administration. The first time I walked in there with my armload of displaced belongings, that smell hit me like a physical wall and I genuinely considered whether living in my car might be a more dignified option. I dropped my clothes on the wheezing bed and just stood there for a minute, taking in my new reality. This was my life now. This was what 6 years of marriage, 8 years of mortgage payments, and countless hours of home maintenance had earned me. A room that smelled like defeat and featured a lovely view of brick. I could hear Bianca and Trevor in my old room, already making themselves at home, probably sprawling across my king-sized bed and enjoying the attached bathroom with a good water pressure that I personally fixed last year when the shower head was acting up. That night, I lay on the wheezing bed, staring at the ceiling, which had a water stain shaped suspiciously like Florida, and thought about how I'd gotten here. At what point had I become so expendable? When did I transform from husband and partner to that guy who pays for stuff and can be moved around like furniture? I replayed the conversation in my head, looking for the moment where I could have said no, could have stood my ground, could have pointed out that this was actually insane and no reasonable person would think this was okay. But every time I imagined standing up for myself, I could see Clara's face, that disappointed look she'd perfected over the years. The one that said I was being selfish and small and not the man she thought she'd married. I could see Bianca's shocked expression, her hand flying to her baby bump in dramatic protection, tears welling up in her eyes as she'd gasp about how she couldn't believe I'd be so cruel to a pregnant woman who just needed help. I could see Trevor shaking his head sadly, probably posting something on Instagram about toxic masculinity and the importance of family support during life transitions. And I could see Clara's parents, Miguel and Rosa, looking at me with such profound disappointment. Their golden daughter's needs being denied by her unreasonable husband. They'd tell everyone at their church, their friends, their bingo group. Can you believe Clara's husband wouldn't give up one room for his pregnant sister-in-law? What kind of man does that? Never mind that it was my house, my money, my room. Those details wouldn't matter. The narrative would be simple. Graham was selfish. Bianca was suffering. End of story. So yeah, I lay there in the guest room that smelled like mothballs and broken dreams, listening to the pipes groan every time someone used the bathroom, staring at the ceiling stained shaped like Florida. And I thought, wow, marriage really is full of surprises. Like surprise homelessness, surprise demotion to second-class citizen in your own home, surprise discovery that your wife values her sister's comfort over your basic human dignity. These were the kinds of surprises they definitely didn't mention in the wedding vows. For better or worse, we'd said, standing at that altar 6 years ago, all hopeful and naive and dressed in expensive clothes we'd only wear once. I thought worse meant things like financial hardship, health problems, family deaths, actual problems that couples face together. I didn't think worse meant your wife will eventually let her sister evict you from your own bedroom while her useless husband drinks your beer and manspreads on your couch. That seemed like crucial information that should have been disclosed up front. Maybe in the prenup I didn't get because I was too trusting and stupid and convinced that love was enough. Love, what a joke. I love Clara. I'd married her, built a life with her, worked my ass off to provide for her. And she'd responded by choosing her sister over me. By treating me like I was disposable, replaceable, less important than keeping Bianca happy. Love was supposed to be partnership, loyalty, having each other's backs. Instead, I got thrown under the bus so fast I had tire marks. I could hear them laughing in the living room, my living room, having a grand old time, probably toasting with my wine to their successful coup. They'd won. I'd lost. And the prize was my own house, my own life, my own dignity. Congratulations to them. But as I lay there in that terrible room, something started to shift in my brain. Maybe it was the smell of mothballs finally killing enough brain cells to affect my judgment. Maybe it was rock bottom finally giving me something solid to push off from. Maybe I just snapped. Whatever it was, a thought crept into my head and wouldn't leave. What if I actually left? Not just to the guest room. Not just to pout for a few days until Clara guilt-tripped me into pretending everything was fine, but actually really permanently left. What would happen then? Would they even notice beyond the sudden absence of someone to pay the bills and fix the broken? Would Clara care, or would she just be relieved that she could give her precious sister even more space? The thought should have made me sad. Instead, it made me smile. And that's when I knew I was done being the good sport. So, there I was, sulking in my sad little guest room like a divorced dad who only gets visitation rights every other weekend, when I decided to actually unpack some of the boxes I'd hastily thrown together during my forced relocation. I figured if I was going to live in this mothball-scented prison cell, I might as well organize it to some degree, maintain some semblance of dignity, even if everything else had been stripped away. I was putting clothes in the hilariously tiny closet when I pulled out the bottom drawer of the ancient dresser that had been languishing in this room since we moved in. And that's when I saw it. A manila folder. Not just any manila folder, but the manila folder. The one I'd completely forgotten about because I'd buried it 6 months ago in a moment of what I now recognized as catastrophic stupidity. The tab on the folder read Delgado promotion package in my own handwriting. And I swear to God, the thing practically glowed like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. I pulled it out slowly, almost reverently, because some part of my brain already knew that this folder contained either my salvation or a painful reminder of the opportunity I'd thrown away. I sat down on the wheezing bed, which let out its signature death rattle in response, and opened it up. Inside was everything. The official offer letter, the benefits package, the relocation assistance paperwork, even a glossy brochure about the company housing that came with the promotion. 6 months ago, my boss, Mr. Delgado, had called me into his office, and I'd spent the entire walk there convinced I was about to get fired. That's just how my anxiety works. Every summon from management is obviously a termination. Every email marked urgent is clearly about my imminent unemployment. Every closed-door meeting is definitely the end of my career. So imagine my shock when, instead of a pink slip, Delgado slid this folder across his desk and said, "Graham, I want you to head up our new regional operations center." It wasn't just a promotion. It was the promotion, the kind that came with a title that sounded important even to people who had no idea what I did for a living. Regional Operations Director. It came with a 30% salary increase, better benefits, actual respect from people who currently treated me like I was one rung above the office plant. But the real kicker, the absolute cherry on top of this vocational sundae, was the housing package. The company owned several studio apartments near the new operations center. And as part of the relocation package, I'd get to live in one rentrée for the first year, then at a drastically reduced rate after that. I'd look through the brochure like it was pornography, which for a guy who'd been paying a mortgage that devoured half his paycheck every month. It basically was. The apartments were modern, clean, located in a nice part of town with actual restaurants and coffee shops instead of just gas stations and sad strip malls. Hardwood floors, updated appliances, in-unit washer and dryer, central air that actually worked. The photos showed these beautiful minimalist spaces with natural light streaming through large windows. The kind of place you'd see in a lifestyle magazine article about urban professionals who have their lives together. The commute would be 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I currently spend an hour each way sitting in traffic, listening to the same radio stations play the same songs, watching my life tick away in 15-minute increments while I breathed exhaust fumes and questioned every decision I'd ever made. But 5 minutes, I could walk to work in good weather. I could go home for lunch. I could actually have a life that didn't revolve around sitting in my car contemplating the sweet release of death while some DJ made terrible jokes between pop songs I'd heard 800 times. I brought the folder home that day so excited I was practically vibrating. This was it. The break we needed. The opportunity that would change everything. Better pay, better location, free housing for a year. We could finally pay down some debt. Save actual money. Maybe even take a vacation that didn't involve staying with Clara's parents and pretending to enjoy her mom's cooking. I'd walk through the door ready to celebrate, ready to plan our future, ready to finally feel like I was moving forward instead of just treading water. And Clara had shot it down so fast my head spun. She didn't even pretend to consider it. I hadn't even finished explaining the benefits before she was shaking her head. Her expression already said in that way that meant the decision was made and any discussion would be purely performative. We can't move, she'd said simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I need to be close to family. My parents are getting older. Bianca might need me. And besides, all our friends are here. Our friends, right? By our friends, she meant her friends who tolerate my presence at social gatherings. And by Bianca might need me, she apparently meant I need to be available to let Bianca move into our house and take over our lives at a moment's notice. Though I guess she didn't want to spoil that surprise 6 months early. And her parents getting older. Miguel was 58 and ran triathlons. Rosa taught Zumba 3 times a week. They weren't exactly knocking on death's door, but apparently the possibility that they might need help sometime in the next 30 years was enough reason to torpedo my career advancement. I tried to argue, tried to point out that we'd still only be 45 minutes away from her parents, that we could visit on weekends, that this was a huge opportunity that might not come around again. But Clara had deployed her secret weapon, tears. Not the loud, dramatic, sobbing kind, but the quiet, disappointed tears that made me feel like I was proposing we move to Mars instead of the next town over. I thought you understood how important family is to me, she'd said, her voice wobbling just enough to make me feel like a monster. I guess I was wrong about what matters to you. What matters to me? Like wanting career advancement and financial stability somehow meant I didn't value family. Like trying to improve our lives was a betrayal of her sacred duty to remain within a 15-mile radius of her parents' house forever. But I caved because that's what I did. I told Delgado, thanks, but no thanks. That family obligations required me to stay local, that I appreciated the offer, but couldn't accept. He looked disappointed, but not surprised, probably because I had pushover written all over my face. The promotion went to Jenkins, a guy who definitely didn't deserve it, but had the advantage of not being married to someone who weaponized guilt like it was an Olympic sport. And I'd shoved the folder in a drawer and tried to forget about it. Tried to convince myself that I'd made the right choice, that marriage was about compromise, that Clara's needs were just as important as mine. I'd been a good husband, a supportive partner. I flipped through the papers and found a business card that had been paperclip-ipped to the offer letter. Jessica Reyes, HR Director, with her direct phone number and email written in pen at the bottom and under that a handwritten note. If circumstances change, Graham, please reach out. We'd still love to have you on the team if circumstances change. Well, Jessica, I thought circumstances have changed so dramatically that I'm basically living in a different reality than I was 6 months ago. 6 months ago, I was a husband with a bedroom and some semblance of dignity. Now I was a guest in my own house, sleeping in a room that smelled like my grandmother's attic if my grandmother had given up on life and started a mothball collection. I sat there on that terrible bed, holding that folder like it was the Holy Grail, and my brain started doing math. The timeline of the universe suddenly snapped into sharp focus. I turned down the job 6 months ago to stay close to Clara's family. And what had happened immediately after? Nothing for a while. But then about 3 months ago, Bianca had announced her pregnancy. And 2 months ago, she'd started making noises about how expensive rent was, how hard it was to save money, how nice it would be to have family support during this special time. And 1 month ago, Clara had started getting distant, distracted, spending hours on the phone with Bianca, having hushed conversations that stopped whenever I walked into the room. The con had been months in the making, and I'd been too stupid to see it coming. Clara had kept me here, anchored to this location, close to family, right where Bianca could swoop in and take over whenever it suited her. Whether Clara had been in on it from the beginning or had just been a willing accomplice when the opportunity arose, I didn't know. But either way, I'd sacrificed a massive career opportunity to stay close to people who apparently thought I was disposable. My brain said, run, just pack up everything. Call Jessica Reyes. Beg for the job if it was still available and get the hell out of this situation before it got any worse. My pride, what little remained of it, said, stay. Staying meant fighting for what was mine. Standing my ground, refusing to be pushed out of my own life by people who contributed nothing but chaos and audacity. It meant showing Clara that she couldn't just treat me like garbage and expect me to smile and take it. But then there was my sarcasm, my old faithful friend who'd gotten me through countless terrible situations with my sanity relatively intact. And my sarcasm said something that made me smile for the first time in days. Imagine their faces if you actually left. Oh, that was a beautiful image. I let myself really picture it for a minute. Clara coming home to find me gone. Really gone. Not just sulking in the guest room, but actually moved out. Bianca realizing that the guy who paid the mortgage had left the building. Trevor understanding that his free ride had just evaporated. All of them standing around my house with my furniture and my appliances, suddenly realizing that someone had to actually pay for all this stuff and that someone was no longer around. Would they panic? Would they scramble? Would Clara finally understand that treating your spouse like a tenant with no rights might have consequences? Would Bianca's perfect Instagram-worthy life suddenly develop some cracks? Would Trevor have to actually get a real job instead of posting motivational quotes about hustle culture while doing literally nothing productive? The more I thought about it, the better it sounded. Not out of pure spite. Okay, maybe partially out of spite. I'm only human, but because staying mint accepting this as my new reality. Staying mint agreeing that I deserve to be treated this way, that my needs and feelings were less important than Bianca's comfort and Clara's desire to play supportive sister. Staying meant spending the next however many months living in this terrible room, watching my wife prioritize everyone except me, slowly dying inside while pretending everything was fine. I looked at the folder again, at the glossy photos of the apartment I could have been living in. At the salary I could have been earning. At the life I could have been living if I hadn't been stupid enough to think that sacrifice equals love. The papers even included the contact information for the moving company the company had contracted with, pre-approved for relocation assistance. Everything was right there, a complete escape plan handed to me 6 months ago that I'd been too blind to appreciate. I picked up my phone. It was 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Way too late to call HR, but I could send an email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. That last little bit of doubt trying to creep in. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to blow up my marriage over a bedroom, but it wasn't about the bedroom? Not really. It was about respect, dignity, being valued as a human being instead of treated like a convenient ATM who also did household repairs. It was about Clara's face when she told me I could take the guest room or move out. Like those were equally reasonable options. It was about Bianca's chirpy thanks for understanding while she rubbed her magic wish ranting baby bump. It was about Trevor's shrug, that casual dismissal of my entire existence. Screw it. I opened my email and started typing. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect weather that made you believe in divine intervention. Clear skies, mild temperature, just enough breeze to keep things comfortable. God himself was apparently on my side for this glorious exodus. I've been up since 5 a.m. running on pure adrenaline and spite, which is honestly a more powerful combination than any energy drink on the market. I'd spent the entire week secretly packing, labeling boxes in my office during lunch breaks, coordinating with the moving company that the job relocation package covered, and working out every single detail of my escape plan like I was planning a heist. Ocean's 11 had nothing on me. I was Ocean's 1, solo operation, maximum efficiency, zero regrets. The moving truck pulled up at exactly 8 a.m., right on schedule, and I swear I heard angels singing. It was one of those big professional trucks with the company logo on the side. The kind that said, "This isn't some amateur operation with a buddy's pickup truck and a case of beer." This was legitimate, organized, and most importantly, already paid for by my new employer. I met the movers at the door, 2 guys named Marcus and Danny, who looked like they moved furniture for a living and could probably bench press a refrigerator without breaking a sweat. They had clipboards. They had dollies. They had that professional efficiency that comes from doing this job 1,000 times. I loved them immediately. Everything on this list goes. I told Marcus, handing him the inventory, I'd carefully prepared. If it's labeled with a blue sticker, it's mine. If it's not labeled, leave it. Marcus scanned the list and let out a low whistle. You taking everything, huh? This a divorce? Not yet, I said cheerfully. But I'm working on it. Danny laughed. Brother, I've done a lot of these moves. The satisfaction on your face right now. I've seen it before. You're about to make somebody's day very bad, aren't you? Danny, my friend, I said, clapping him on the shoulder. I'm about to make several people's days very bad, and I'm going to enjoy every second of it. We got to work. I'd been strategic about my sticker placement throughout the week, marking everything I'd purchased with those little blue dots you use for garage sales. The couch. Mine. I bought it 3 years ago when Clara's old one finally died after she spilled an entire glass of red wine on it. Blue sticker. The TV. Mine. A birthday present to myself that Clara had initially complained was too big until she wanted to binge watch her reality shows on it. Blue sticker. The coffee maker. Mine. Purchased after the old one broke and Clara said she'd get around to replacing it but never did. Blue sticker. The dining table and chairs, mine, bought when we moved into this house because Clara's parents' hand-me-down table was literally held together with duct tape and prayers, blue stickers on every piece. I was in the kitchen directing Marcus toward the coffee maker when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Trevor appeared first, wearing boxer shorts and a t-shirt that said, "Good vibes only." Which felt ironic given that the vibes were about to get very, very bad. His hair was sticking up in 12 different directions. And he had that confused, just woke up expression that would have been funny if I wasn't busy orchestrating his eviction from comfort. "Dude," he said, rubbing his eyes like maybe he was hallucinating. "What's going on? Why are there movers here?" "I'm moving out," I said simply, wrapping the coffee maker's cord around its base. "Didn't Clara tell you moving out? Like moving out? Is there another kind of moving out I'm not aware of?" "Yes, Trevor. I'm moving, relocating, departing, exiting stage left, leaving this blessed household to you fine people." He blinked at me, his brain clearly struggling to process this information at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. "But you're really taking everything? Like everything? Everything?" "Yep," I said cheerfully, handing the coffee maker to Danny. "Even the toaster. Speaking of which, you might want to learn how to make toast without burning down the kitchen. Don't burn the baby's waffles when it arrives." Trevor's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, concern, dawning horror. "Wait, the toaster, too? But we don't have another." "Not my problem anymore, bro," I said, slapping a blue sticker on said toaster and adding it to Di's armload. "Should have thought about that before you moved into my bedroom." That's when Bianca came thundering down the stairs, or as close to thundering as a pregnant woman in a silk nightgown can manage. Her hair, usually so perfectly arranged, was in a messy bun, and her face had that pillowcase look of someone who'd been sleeping hard and did not appreciate being woken up by the sounds of furniture moving. "What is happening, Graham? Why are there strange men in our house?" "Our house? Our house?" The audacity of this woman was truly breathtaking. "They're movers, Bianca. And it's not our house. It's technically Clara's house, which is about to become Clara's problem." I gestured around the increasingly empty living room. "I'm taking my stuff. You know, the stuff I bought with my money from my job. Turns out it's mine, and I'm allowed to take it when I leave. You can't just take everything." Bianca's voice hit that high-pitched frequency that probably annoyed dogs 3 blocks away. That's crazy. What are we supposed to sit on? What are we supposed to watch TV on? You're being completely unreasonable." Marcus paused in the middle of unplugging the TV, looked at me, and raised an eyebrow. I nodded, and he continued disconnecting cables. "Well, Bianca," I said, adopting my most reasonable tone, the one you'd use to explain basic concepts to a particularly slow child. "You could sit on the floor. It's very trendy right now. Very minimalist. Very Japanese. I hear it's great for your posture. As for TV, you've got phones, don't you? Trevor's always on his anyway. Just hold it really far away and squint." "This is insane," she sputtered, her hand automatically going to her belly in that protective gesture she deployed whenever she wanted to remind everyone she was pregnant and therefore beyond criticism. Clara, get down here." Clara appeared at the top of the stairs in her bathrobe, looking like she'd been expecting this, but hoping it wouldn't actually happen. That's the face of someone whose bluff just got called, whose gamble just crashed and burned. She came down slowly, each step deliberate, and I could see her brain working overtime, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to make me the bad guy, how to guilt me into backing down. "Graham," she said carefully, using that calm, condescending tone she'd perfected over 6 years of marriage. "What are you doing? What does it look like I'm doing?" "I'm moving out. You said I could take the guest room or move out. I'm choosing option B, surprise." "I didn't think you'd actually," she started, but I cut her off. Didn't think I'd actually leave? Yeah, I got that impression. Funny thing about treating people like they're disposable. Sometimes they take the hint and actually dispose of themselves from the situation. Who knew? Marcus and Danny were working with impressive efficiency, clearly enjoying the drama while maintaining professional demeanor. They'd moved on to the dining room, and Marcus was already unscrewing the legs from the table. Trevor watched with increasing horror as each piece of furniture disappeared, like watching his comfortable lifestyle evaporate in real time. "You're really taking the dining table?" Trevor asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Where are we supposed to eat?" "I don't know, man. Maybe you could use that creativity you're always posting about on Instagram. Manifesting an abundance and all that. Manifest yourself a table. Use the power of positive thinking. Ask the universe to provide." I couldn't keep the sarcasm out of my voice even if I'd wanted to. "Or here's a wild idea. You could buy one with money from a job. You know what those are, right?" His face flushed red, but he didn't have a comeback because we both knew he hadn't paid for a single thing in this house. He'd been living rentrer in my space, eating food I paid for, using utilities I covered. And now reality was crashing down like a house of cards in a wind tunnel. Bianca had moved on to a different strategy. Tears. Not the quiet, dignified kind, but the loud, heaving sobs of someone who's used to crying getting them what they want. "How could you do this to us?" "To me? I'm pregnant. We need stability. You need to figure it out," I said, not unkindly, but not sympathetically either. Like adults do, like I've been doing for years while you all treated me like the hired help. "You wanted my room. You got it. You wanted me out of the way. Mission accomplished. But you don't get to have the room and all my furniture and my financial support. That's not how this works." Clara was still standing on the bottom stair, frozen, watching Marcus and Danny load the couch onto the dolly. The couch where she'd spent countless hours watching her shows, where she'd napped on Sunday afternoons, where she'd sat with Bianca planning their perfect nursery setup for my bedroom. "Graham, can we please talk about this privately?" "No," I said simply. "We had weeks to talk about this privately. You chose to have this conversation publicly when you announced to everyone that I was being moved to the guest room. You chose public, so we're staying public. Marcus, the couch looks good. Watch the door frame on your way out." "You got it, boss," Marcus said, and I swear I saw him smirking. By the time they got to the bedroom furniture, Bianca had progressed from crying to fury. "You can't take the bed. Where are we supposed to sleep?" "There's a perfectly good bed in the guest room," I pointed out. "You know, the room you assigned me to. Consider it your consolation prize. It's a little small, smells like mothballs, and the mattress wheezes, but hey, it was good enough for me, right? Should be fine for you." Trevor had his phone out, probably texting someone for help or possibly just scrolling Instagram because that's what he did in crisis situations. Clara had gone pale, like she was finally understanding that actions have consequences, and those consequences sometimes involve losing all your furniture. "Where are you even going?" Clara demanded, finding her voice again. "You can't just leave with no plan." "Oh, I have a plan," I said, smiling. "Remember that job offer I turned down 6 months ago? The one you made me refuse because you needed to stay close to family? Well, turns out they still wanted me. Funny how that works. I start Monday and I'll be living in company housing, studio apartment, 5-minute commute, rentrer for the first year. It's small, but you know what? It has peace, quiet, no ungrateful in-laws, no entitled sisters, no guilt trips, just me, my furniture, and the sweet taste of freedom." The looks on their faces were priceless. Clara shocked into silence. Bianca's mouth hanging open mid-sob. Trevor looking like someone had just told him Santa wasn't real and also his credit card had been declined. This was the moment, the beautiful moment where they all realized simultaneously that they'd vastly overestimated my willingness to be a doormat and vastly underestimated my ability to actually leave. "You planned this?" Clara whispered. "You've been planning this all week." "Yep," I said proudly. "Turns out I'm pretty good at logistics." "Who knew?" "Oh, wait. That's literally my job. The job that pays for everything you're currently standing on or were standing on. Most of it's on the truck now." By the time the movers finished, the house looked like a real estate listing for a property that had been foreclosed and stripped. The living room echoed. The dining room was empty except for some dust bunnies that had been hiding under my table. The bedroom had the guest room bed and nothing else. I'd taken it all. Every stick of furniture I'd purchased, every appliance I'd bought, every item that had a blue sticker. I even took the good blender, the one that could actually crush ice without sounding like it was dying. If I'd paid for it, it went on the truck. I stood in the empty living room, keys in hand, looking at the three of them standing there in their pajamas, surrounded by nothing. "Well," I said cheerfully. "This has been fun, Clara. The mortgage payment is due on the 1st. That's in 5 days. In case you've lost track, it's still in your name, by the way. All yours. You might want to figure out how you're going to cover it now that I won't be contributing." I tossed the house keys on the floor where the couch used to be. They landed with a satisfying clink in the empty space. "Good luck with everything," I said. "Bianca, congratulations on the baby, Trevor. Good luck with that job search. I'm sure you'll start any day now. Clara." I paused, looking at my wife one last time. "I hope your sister's company was worth it." And then I walked out, got in my car that was packed with essentials, and followed the moving truck to my new apartment. I drove away from that house humming like a man who'd just been released from prison. Because in a way, I had been. The sun was shining, the road was clear, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could actually breathe. Freedom tasted like victory, and it was delicious. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted industrial building that had been renovated into modern housing units. The kind of place that real estate listings describe as urban chic and character-filled. Translation: it used to be a factory or warehouse, and now it's got exposed brick walls, and people pay premium prices to live in what their great-grandparents would have considered working-class housing. But I didn't care about the irony or the gentrification or any of that. All I cared about was that it was mine, it was quiet, and nobody in it was related to Clara. I walked in behind Marcus and Danny as they hauled in the first load. And I'm not ashamed to admit, I got a little emotional. The place was small, maybe 500 square feet total, but it was laid out smart. An open-plan living area with those floor-to-ceiling windows that the brochure had promised. A kitchenette that was compact but had everything you actually needed, and a bathroom that was small but clean and had water pressure that could strip paint. The bedroom area was really just an alcove with enough space for my bed and a dresser, but it had a closet and privacy which was more than I'd had in the guest room from hell. But the real selling points, the features that made this place absolutely perfect, were two things that I hadn't experienced in years. Peace and Wi-Fi that didn't buffer every 30 seconds. I'm talking about Google Fiber, enterprise-grade internet that the building had included in the rent. I could stream Netflix in 4K without hearing the dreaded pause, the spinning wheel of doom, the "your connection is unstable" message that had been the soundtrack of my married life. Clara had refused to upgrade our internet because she said it was too expensive, which was code for, "I don't care about your needs, and I'm going to spend that money on decorative pillows instead." The movers finished up around noon, and I tipped them both generously because they'd been absolute professionals, and also because Danny had muttered, "Good for you, man." When we were loading the last box, solidarity among men who'd been pushed too far. It was a beautiful thing. After they left, I stood in the middle of my new space, surrounded by boxes and furniture that needed arranging. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Actual happiness. Not the fake happiness you perform for other people. Not the "I'm fine" happiness you tell yourself to get through the day, but real, genuine, bone-deep satisfaction. I celebrated my freedom the only way that made sense. I made coffee. Not just any coffee, but coffee made in my coffee maker. The one I'd bought, the one that had the settings programmed exactly how I liked them, the one that Clara had always complained made the kitchen counter look cluttered. I made a perfect cup, added the exact amount of cream I preferred. Another thing Clara had judged me for. Apparently, real men drank it black, and I sat on my couch in my apartment and just existed for a minute. No screaming, no guilt trips, no passive-aggressive comments about how I loaded the dishwasher wrong or folded the towels incorrectly or breathed too loudly during her reality shows. No Bianca floating through rooms like a pregnant ghost, rearranging my stuff and making helpful suggestions about how I could improve my life by being more like Trevor. No, Trevor himself sprawled on my furniture like a starfish, scrolling through Instagram and occasionally looking up to deliver some profound wisdom he'd learned from a motivational quote superimposed over a sunset. Just silence, beautiful, golden, perfect silence, and Netflix loading at full speed without buffering. I spent the afternoon unpacking and arranging furniture, which sounds boring, but was actually therapeutic. Every box I opened, every item I placed was a deliberate choice that nobody questioned or criticized. I wanted my TV at a certain angle done. No debate about Fune or whether it would create bad energy or whatever nonsense Clara had read in her wellness blog that week. I wanted my books organized by genre instead of color. Boom. Organized by genre because this was my space and I could alphabetize my life however I damn well pleased. The apartment started to take shape, and yeah, it was small, but it was efficient. Everything had a place. Everything made sense and everything was mine. I brought my desk, my gaming setup that Clara had always complained took up too much space. My collection of craft beers that I'd been hiding in the back of the fridge because Bianca said they looked trashy. I arranged them proudly in my new fridge, labels facing out, organized by brewery. They look beautiful. They look like freedom. By the time evening rolled around, I was exhausted, but in the best way. The way you feel after a productive day, not the soul-crushing exhaustion of living with people who drained your energy like emotional vampires. I ordered pizza because I could, because nobody was going to judge my food choices or suggest I should be eating more vegetables or point out that carbs after 6 p.m. were basically poison. I ate pizza on my couch, watching whatever I wanted on my TV, and it was the best meal I'd had in months. That's when my phone started blowing up. I'd been ignoring it all day, letting it sit face down on the counter while I unpacked and organized and generally enjoyed my newfound peace. But curiosity got the better of me, so I picked it up during a commercial break. Old habits die hard. And Holy Mother of God, it was a disaster zone. 15 missed calls from Clara. 15. That wasn't "I'm worried about you calling." That was, "I need something from you and you're not responding fast enough" calling. There were also 22 missed calls from Bianca, which was actually impressive given that she'd probably had to call with one hand while dramatically clutching her baby bump with the other. Even Trevor had tried calling, which meant Clara or Bianca had literally forced him to because Trevor's natural response to conflict was to scroll Instagram until the problem went away. The voicemails were a journey. Clara started off calm and reasonable. "Graham, call me back. We need to talk about this." By voicemail number 5, she progressed to angry. "This is ridiculous. You can't just leave without discussing it properly." By voicemail 10, she was in panic mode. "Graham, please, we need to figure this out. The mortgage is due soon." And by voicemail 15, she'd apparently reached acceptance mixed with fury. "Fine, be that way, but you're going to regret this." Bianca's voicemails were less of an emotional journey and more of a consistent theme of outrage. Every single one was some variation of, "How dare you? This is so selfish and what are we supposed to do now?" One particularly memorable message included her saying, "You've left us with nothing." Which would have been more impactful if it wasn't demonstrably false. I'd left them with a house, utilities that were still connected, and whatever furniture Clara had bought herself, which admittedly wasn't much because she'd always insisted we use my money for practical purchases while her money went to investments, like scented candles and decorative throws. Trevor's single voicemail was actually kind of sad. He sounded genuinely confused, like a kid who just found out his parents weren't going to buy him the toy he wanted. "Hey, man. Graham, it's Trevor. Listen, I think maybe we got off on the wrong foot here. Can we talk? Bianca is really upset. And Clara's like freaking out and I don't really know what to do here. Could you maybe bring back the coffee maker? Just the coffee maker. Man, we don't know how to work the cheap one." I sat there listening to these messages, eating my pizza, and felt exactly zero guilt. Actually, that's not true. I felt negative guilt. I felt anti-guilt. I felt vindicated, justified, and more certain than ever that I'd made the right call. They'd treated me like a resource to be exploited. And now that the resource had removed itself, they were panicking. Not because they missed me as a person, but because they missed what I provided: money, labor, and a steady supply of stuff they'd convinced themselves they were entitled to. The text messages were even better. Clara had sent a novel's worth of texts ranging from apologetic to accusatory to desperately practical. "We need to talk about the mortgage. You can't just abandon your responsibilities. I'm sorry if you felt unappreciated, but this is extreme. How am I supposed to pay for everything? Bianca needs stability right now. You're being incredibly selfish. Please just come back so we can discuss this like adults." Like adults, right? Because adults give away their bedrooms to their in-laws and sleep in mothballs guest rooms without complaint. Because adults let their spouses unilaterally make major household decisions without discussion. Because adults definitely don't pack up and leave when they're treated like second-class citizens in their own homes. My mistake. Bianca's texts were somehow even more entitled. She'd sent pictures of the empty rooms with captions like, "Look what you did. And we have nothing to sit on and the baby's room is empty because of you." The baby's room. The baby that wasn't even born yet needed a room, but I didn't need a bedroom. The logic was staggering. One text said, "Mom and Dad are so disappointed in you," which would have hurt if I gave a single damn what Clara's parents thought of me. Miguel and Rosa had made it clear years ago that I was just the guy who married their daughter, not actually part of the family. Their disappointment wasn't a threat. It was a Tuesday. I sipped my beer, one of my trashy craft beers that I'd liberated from the fridge, and smiled at my phone. This was amazing. This was better than cable. They were all spiraling. Realizing that they'd pushed too far, And I was sitting here in my peaceful apartment eating pizza and watching their panic in real time through the magic of modern telecommunications. I thought about responding. I really did. I composed several texts in my head. Sorry, can't hear you over the sound of my Wi-Fi not buffering. Have you tried manifesting furniture? Thoughts and prayers for your sitting situation? Maybe if you rub Bianca's belly hard enough, a couch will appear. But I didn't send any of them. Know why? Because not responding was so much better. Radio silence was the most powerful response I could give. Every hour I didn't answer was another hour they spent panicking, arguing with each other and realizing that maybe, just maybe, they'd screwed up. Let them sit with that. Literally sit with it on the floor since they didn't have furniture. Instead, I finished my pizza, cracked open another beer, and queued up a movie I'd been wanting to watch for months, but hadn't because Clara hated action films, and Trevor always wanted to watch whatever indie documentary was trending. The movie streamed perfectly. Not a single buffer. Crystal clear picture on my TV that I'd paid for and would never have to share again. That night, I went to bed, in my bedroom area, in my apartment, and I slept better than I had in years. No sounds of Bianca and Trevor doing whatever they did at night in the room next to mine. No Clara sighing dramatically every time I moved. No Trevor's alarm going off at 5 a.m. for his morning Instagram photo shoot that he called sunrise motivation content. Just quiet darkness and the comfortable knowledge that I was exactly where I deserved to be. My phone was still blowing up on the nightstand, buzzing with increasingly desperate messages, but I turned off the vibrate function. They could call all they wanted. They could text until their thumbs fell off. I had finally learned the most important lesson of my adult life. You can't force people to value you. But you sure as hell don't have to stick around while they prove that they don't. For the first time in months, hell, maybe years, I smiled for no reason. Just a genuine smile in the dark, lying in my bed, in my space, living my life. They'd thought I was disposable, that I'd just take whatever they dished out because that's what I'd always done. They'd kicked me out thinking I had nowhere to go, nothing to fall back on, no options beyond accepting my demotion to family servant. But I was the only thing that had been holding their circus together. I was the foundation, the support beam, the weight-bearing wall. And now they had each other. Clara, Bianca, and Trevor, 3 people with a combined understanding of financial responsibility that could fit in a shot glass. They had a house with a mortgage due in 5 days. They had empty rooms that needed furniture. They had bills that needed paying. They had reality knocking on their door. And I had peace. Honestly, best trade of my life. And it was only day 1. A few days into my new life of blissful solitude, I realized I'd made one critical error in my escape plan. I'd forgotten to update my mailing address with about 17 different companies. And some important stuff was probably still being delivered to the old house. Specifically, my new insurance card and the title to my car that I'd been waiting on from the DMV. So, despite every instinct in my body screaming, "Don't go back there," I had to make one more trip to enemy territory. I drove over on a Wednesday afternoon, timing it for when I figured Clara would be at work and the golden couple might be out doing whatever unemployed people do during the day. Probably a juice cleanse or a couple's yoga class or some other activity that costs money they didn't have. I had my key. Wait, no, I didn't. I'd thrown it on the floor during my dramatic exit. Crap. I knocked on the door of my former residence like a stranger, which felt both ironic and completely appropriate. Clara answered, and she did not look good. Her hair was up in a messy bun that was messy in the "I haven't washed this in 3 days" way rather than the trendy way. She was wearing sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, and her eyes had that puffy quality that comes from either crying or not sleeping or both. For a split second, I almost felt bad. Almost. "Graham," she said flatly. "Come for more stuff to take." "Just here for my mail," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Insurance card should have arrived by now." She opened the door wider and I walked into what used to be my house. The place looked like a sad showroom for furniture stores going out of business, a couple of folding chairs in the living room, a card table in the dining area, and I could see through to the kitchen where Bianca was standing with her arms crossed like a security guard at a nightclub who just spotted fake IDs. Well, Bianca said as I entered the kitchen where the mail was always dumped on the counter. "Look who decided to show up. The ghost of husbands past." "Good to see you, too, Bianca," I said, rifling through the stack of envelopes. "Love what you've done with the place. Very minimalist, very broke college student chic." That's when Clara came in behind me, and I could feel the temperature in the room drop about 20 degrees. They positioned themselves like they'd rehearsed this. Clara by the doorway blocking my exit. Bianca by the counter blocking my access to the rest of the kitchen. It was an ambush. I'd walked right into the mob's HR department. You stripped the house. Clara yelled. And wow, we were starting at volume level 10. No warm up, no small talk, just straight to screaming. You took everything, Graham. Everything. I looked up from the mail, found my insurance card, score, and raised an eyebrow. Correction, I said calmly, which I knew would infuriate her more than yelling back. I reclaimed my investments. There's a difference. Your investments? Bianca's voice could have shattered glass. She stepped closer, one hand protectively on her belly, because of course it was. You can't just take everything without permission. That's theft. Oh, this was rich. This was beautiful. I actually laughed, which was apparently the wrong response based on how red Bianca's face turned. Oh, sweetie, I said, and I let all the condescension I'd been holding back for weeks drip into those two words. Permission was implied every single time I swiped my credit card. Every time I paid the bill, every time I signed the receipt. That's how ownership works. I bought it, therefore it's mine, therefore I can take it wherever I want. It's not theft when you're taking your own property. It's called moving. You're being completely unreasonable, Clara said. And I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. Weaponized crying. Classic move. We needed that furniture. How are we supposed to live here with nothing? I don't know, Clara. How was I supposed to live in the guest room with my dignity? But nobody seemed concerned about that, did they? I found the DMV envelope with my car title and shoved it in my pocket. Maybe you could try what normal people do. Buy furniture with money that you earn from jobs. We don't have money for furniture right now. Bianca snapped. In case you haven't noticed, I'm pregnant. We're trying to save for the baby, right? Saving for the baby by living rentrée in someone else's house and demanding they give up their bedroom. That's some solid financial planning right there. You should write a book. How to mooch your way through pregnancy. A guide to entitlement. Where was Trevor during all this? I looked around and spotted him sitting in the corner on one of those folding chairs, scrolling through his phone like his device held the secrets to world peace, or at least an escape route from this conversation. He was wearing noise-canceling headphones, actual headphones. His wife and sister-in-law were in a screaming match with the guy who used to pay their bills, and Trevor was listening to a podcast or lo-fi beats or whale sounds or whatever the hell he filled his empty head with. Don't you have anything to say? I called over to him. He looked up slowly, pulled one headphone off, and blinked at me like I just materialized out of thin air. Huh? Your wife is yelling at me about furniture. Want to contribute to the conversation? Maybe offer to get a job and buy some? He looked at Bianca, then at Clara, then back at his phone. The vibes are really off in here, man, he said, and put his headphone back on. The vibes. The vibes were off. This man's entire contribution to the crisis was a comment about vibes. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. This was the guy Clara thought I should learn from. This was the superior husband, the better example, the man who understood what really mattered in life. And what mattered to Trevor, apparently, was avoiding conflict and maintaining his good vibes at all costs. You know what? I said, still chuckling. This has been fun, but I've got my mail and I've got a life to get back to. You ladies have a great time figuring this out. Trevor, keep those vibes immaculate, buddy. I headed for the door and Clara tried one more time. Graham, wait. Can we please just talk about this like adults? We made a mistake, okay? We should have been more considerate, but you can't just abandon us like this. I stopped at the doorway and turned back. They all looked miserable. Even Trevor had taken off his headphones now, sensing that something important might be happening. They looked lost, confused, like kids who just realized actions have consequences, and consequences sometimes suck. But I was done being their safety net, their backup plan, their source of infinite resources, and zero gratitude. 2 days after the kitchen showdown, my phone rang at 7 o'clock in the morning, which was already a red flag because nobody calls at 7 a.m. unless someone died or someone's about to commit murder. I looked at the screen, Bianca, and seriously considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity won out because I had a feeling this wasn't going to be another please bring back the toaster situation. What? I answered, not even pretending to be polite at this hour. Where's the money? Bianca's voice was shaking. That particular tremor that comes from rage mixed with panic. Where is the insurance money, Graham? I sat up in bed, suddenly very awake. What insurance money? Don't play dumb. Clara told me that when your dad died, there was life insurance. A lot of it. She said it was in a joint account that you were both saving it. Where is it? Oh, this was going to be good. I could practically feel the plot twist coming like a freight train and I was here for every second of it. Bianca, I said slowly. I hate to break this to you, but there is no money. There never was any money. Well, there was money briefly about 7 years ago when my dad died, but it's been gone for a long time. Silence on the other end. Then you're lying. I'm really not. That insurance money paid off Clara's student loans, covered the down payment on the house, and furnished the place when we moved in. It's been gone for years. Why would Clara tell you? And then it hit me. Oh my God, she told you there was money so you'd move in, she said. Bianca's voice cracked. She said there was money, that if things got tight, there was a safety net, that you were just being stingy about sharing it, but she could access it if we really needed it. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. This was beautiful. This was karmic justice at its finest. I didn't hear the full story of what went down after that phone call until later, but I got bits and pieces from various sources. Clara's cousin who thought the whole thing was hilarious. A mutual friend who loved drama. And one particularly detailed drunk text from Trevor at 2 a.m. that he definitely didn't mean to send to me. But let me tell you, it was glorious. Apparently, after I hung up on Rosa, all hell broke loose at the Martinez house. Bianca had a complete meltdown. And I'm not talking about her usual dramatic tears. I'm talking full-on screaming match, throwing things, the kind of explosion that makes neighbors call the cops to do a wellness check. She'd cornered Clara in the kitchen and demanded the truth. And when Clara tried to dodge and deflect and do her usual, "You're misunderstanding" routine, Bianca wasn't having it. "You lied to me," Bianca had screamed. According to Trevor's drunk text, which was surprisingly detailed, "You said there was money. You promised there was money to help us. I wouldn't even be here if you hadn't promised." And there it was. The truth that Clara had been desperately trying to keep buried. Bianca hadn't moved in out of sisterly love or because she wanted to be close to family during her pregnancy. She'd moved in because Clara had dangled the promise of financial support, of a safety net made of money that didn't exist. Clara had baited the trap with fake insurance money, and Bianca had walked right into it, dragging Trevor and their unrealistic expectations along with her. Clara tried to calm things down, tried to explain that she'd misunderstood the financial situation, that she'd thought there was more money than there was, but Bianca wasn't buying it. She'd given up her apartment, her independence, her dignity, all for a pile of cash that had never existed. Trevor, for once in his useless life, actually looked up from his phone. He was panicked, really panicked, because suddenly he realized his sugar in-law fund had completely dried up. How are we supposed to afford anything? Trevor had apparently asked, which was rich coming from a guy whose greatest contribution to household finances was occasionally getting paid $20 for an Instagram post. "You said Clara would help us. You said there was money." The Martinez parents just watched their golden daughter's perfect life implode in real time. Miguel sat there with his head in his hands while Rosa tried to mediate. But even she couldn't spin this disaster into something positive. This wasn't just a family squabble. This was fraud, manipulation, and lies. All wrapped up in a pregnancy announcement and tied with a bow made of entitlement. Meanwhile, I was at my apartment leaning against my fridge. Well, the space where my fridge used to be in their kitchen, but you know what I mean. Enjoying the free entertainment that was my former family destroying itself from the inside. I hadn't done anything except tell the truth. I hadn't manipulated anyone, hadn't lied, hadn't promised things I couldn't deliver. I just removed myself from their dysfunctional circus. And apparently, my absence was the pin that popped their balloon of delusion. The best part came when I decided to drop one final truth bomb. I texted Clara. Just a simple, straightforward message. "By the way, the mortgage still 6 years left on the payment plan. $1,200 a month, due on the 1st. Your name only. Have fun figuring that out now that your imaginary money is gone and your real money source has left the building." Her response came back almost immediately. "You're," and I replied, "Maybe, but I'm in with my own apartment, my own furniture, and exactly 0 pregnant in-laws. How's your situation working out?" She didn't respond after that. Weeks passed and the updates kept rolling in through the grapevine like the world's most satisfying soap opera. Turns out when you build your entire life on lies and other people's money, things tend to collapse pretty spectacularly. Who knew? Clara sold the house not for a profit, mind you. She sold it at a loss because she needed out fast and couldn't afford the mortgage payments on her own. Apparently, working as an office manager at a dental practice doesn't quite cover a $1,200 monthly mortgage, plus utilities, plus food, plus all the other expenses of adult life. Shocking, I know. The house that I'd helped pay for, that I'd maintained and improved and treated like it actually mattered, got sold to some investors who were probably going to flip it. Clara walked away with barely enough to cover the realtor fees and closing costs. Bianca and Trevor moved into a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the bad side of town. The kind of place where the parking lot has more potholes than pavement and you can hear your neighbors' entire lives through the paper-thin walls. No nursery, no extra space, no Instagram-worthy decor, just reality, served cold and unfiltered. Trevor was supposedly looking for jobs, which I translated as scrolling LinkedIn for 5 minutes a day while perfecting his napping skills. Bianca had taken a part-time job at a retail store, working while visibly pregnant, which I'm sure was humbling for someone who'd spent the last few years treating employment like it was beneath her. Clara started working admin at a dentist's office, answering phones, and scheduling appointments, which was a far cry from her previous life of having someone else pay for everything while she played supportive sister. I heard through mutual friends that she looked tired all the time, that the spark had gone out of her eyes, that she'd stopped posting on social media because her life was no longer worth documenting. And me, I thrived. I got promoted 3 months into my new position. Because turns out, when you're not emotionally exhausted from living with ungrateful people, you actually perform better at work. Who could have predicted that? I decorated my apartment with furniture that didn't match, but was mine. Hung posters that Clara would have called tacky and generally lived like a human being who enjoyed his own space. I started going to this cafe near my apartment every Saturday morning, one of those trendy places with exposed brick and overpriced cappuccinos. Clara had always called places like this pretentious and refused to go to them, which in hindsight was just another way of controlling what I did and where I went. Now, I went there every week, ordered the most expensive drink on the menu, and sat by the window reading or just people watching, enjoying the simple pleasure of doing whatever the hell I wanted. For the first time in years, I smiled for no reason. Not because something funny happened, not because I was performing happiness for someone else, but because I was genuinely content. I'd wake up in my apartment, make coffee in my coffee maker, sit on my couch, and just exist peacefully. No drama, no guilt trips, no walking on eggshells around people who viewed me as a resource rather than a person. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd kicked me out thinking I was disposable, that I was the weak link, that they could easily replace what I provided. Clara had looked at me and seen someone she could manipulate and control. Bianca had looked at me and seen a wallet with legs. Trevor had looked at me and seen. Well, Trevor probably hadn't looked at me at all, too busy with his phone, but I was the only thing holding their whole circus together. I was the foundation, the load-bearing wall, the person who actually understood how adult life worked. I paid the bills, fixed the broken things, planned for the future, and handled reality while they lived in their fantasy world of Instagram aesthetics and imaginary money. Now they had each other, Clara, Bianca, and Trevor. 3 people with a combined understanding of financial responsibility that could fit in a shot glass with room for more delusion. They had bills they couldn't pay, jobs they didn't want, and apartments they couldn't afford. They had reality, and reality was not as forgiving as I'd been. And I had peace. I had my Wi-Fi that didn't buffer. I had my blender that made perfect smoothies without anyone judging me for using it. I had my space, my freedom, and my dignity. I had Saturday mornings at pretentious cafes drinking $7 cappuccinos. I had a life that was mine. They kicked me out thinking I was disposable. Turns out I was the only thing worth keeping. And now they've got each other and I've got everything else. Honestly, best trait of my life.